Hey there, can you hear me okay? Hey, Janine, can you hear me? Hi there, everybody. We'll get started in a few minutes. I just want to know if people can hear me. If you can, just let me know in the chat box. Great. Thank you very much. Okay. Yep. Good. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Like I said, we'll get started in about, looks like about 6 minutes. All right. Thank you, everybody. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Statistics Solutions Literature Review webinar. We have a support person on with us today who can answer your questions about, the availability of the webinar. She will also post links where you can find the webinar. We archive them on our website. I believe also folks get a copy emailed to them. So she'll be posting some helpful links for you as far as that goes, and she can answer any kind of non-content related questions you might have, any technical questions or things like that. As far as content related questions about the chapter or any of the features of the chapter as we go along, feel free to type those questions into the chat box or the question and answer box so you don't forget them as we go along, but I won't get to them until the end. I'll just open it up to question and answer. Okay, so yeah, this is a webinar on the literature review, which is usually chapter 2. Our model for the dissertation is based on the 5-chapter model, which is pretty typical. There are different models. Some schools have more chapters. It's somehow just how they kind of section out the material. But the literature review, whatever chapter it happens to be, it is usually, the same, has the same features, similar features. Okay, and again, based on the 5-chapter model, it's usually chapter 2. Okay, moving ahead. This is the typical features of the lit review generally, and what we'll be focusing on today. Introduction, literature search strategy, theoretical framework, review of the literature, and a summary. Now, the review of the literature section is the heart of the chapter. It's probably about 80 to 85% of the chapter. And that will be different for every study because every study is different and it focuses on different things. But these generally are the common features. All right. And before we kind of get rolling, I'm going to say this now, and I'm going to say it several other times throughout the webinar. Always get your school's template. Okay, is my mic sensitivity, is it too high?
It's probably fine. It just is a little like, I don't know, the word might be maybe scratchy or something, like you're walking and talking.
Oh, okay, but I'm not. Okay.
That's a little better.
Okay, I think it's the connection where it plugs in. Okay.
That's still about the same. It's fine though. I mean, we can hear you fine.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yep. Okay, so before we get rolling to the introduction, always get your school's template if you haven't already for the dissertation and for the chapters. What we're going to cover is kind of a general template, and it seems to be pretty standard across the board. However, your school's template is always going to be the final arbiter of what should be or of what's required, basically. So even though what we have here usually pretty much aligns, your school may have like little differences. Sometimes they want the headers named different things, or some sections will be in different places. So always kind of default to your school's template. If your school doesn't have a template, yes, we do have on our website, we do have general templates, but it's always good to then just ask your chair if your school doesn't have a template. Ask your chair for a template, or ask your chair for an example of a dissertation that they want you to follow. Okay, so moving forward, so the chapter, like all the other chapters, starts with an introduction. Typically, again, unless your school's template says something very specific, it's typical that you restate the purpose of your study. So the idea here is to reorient your reader, right? They've been through one chapter, they're coming into another one. Reorient them about what it is you're doing and why. And it doesn't take a long time. restate the purpose of your study, remind the reader of the importance of your study and the need to conduct it. You can also end the section if you want by previewing the contents or what's going to follow in the chapter. Typically what comes next is something called a literature search strategy. Some schools call it something else, like methods of searching. But the idea is the same, that your reader, your professor in this case, wants to know and wants to be shown that you have conducted a comprehensive search. So in other words, you've cast, a wide net as far as doing the research. So you haven't really missed anything, right? So when you make kind of statements in your lit review, sometimes people say there's not a lot of research on this topic. Now, if you've done a comprehensive lit review and you know that based on what you didn't find, that's okay. But just to say it and really, you kind of, did a little bit of a search, you can't really say that then. If so, the lit search strategy helps description of what you did helps to confirm to your professors, your readers, that you really did do a comprehensive search and you covered, you hit everything that was out there that was pertinent. How do you do that? So this is a description of your search, and I'm gonna, in a minute here, we're gonna kind of take a little detour, and I'll just kind of give you a general, show you a little bit about searching in a college library. So what it is usually this section is not long either. You just, you start off by saying, using so-and-so, whatever your university is, online library portal. I conducted a comprehensive search for whatever your subject is for research on the topic. You want to list the databases you searched. You want to list the search tools that you used. So, search tools like Google Scholar, Academic Search Complete. These are kind of search engines that search multiple databases. If you went straight to a specific database because, say you're in education, ERIC, E-R-I-C, it's an acronym. It's a major database for education. So if you want to do like a targeted, search, you might go to a specific database in your subject area. Or again, use these, or both, use these kind of mega search engines, mega search tools of like Google Scholar, and there's other ones that search multiple databases, and you can cover a lot of ground that way. So list the databases that you searched, the search tools that you used. If you search any specific journals, sometimes there's journals that are really important to your discipline. If you targeted any specific journals, you want to say that. And you want to include the search terms that you use and the combinations of search terms. And these aren't going to be anything special or new, or when I say special, I mean they're not going to be anything outside of the ordinary to your study, because they're going to be based on the factors that you're studying, your variables, your major concept, your theory. And the last part here, include any way that you filtered or qualified your search. This is important. There's some kind of standard things, like if you only wanted articles in English, you might click that button. So what comes back to you after your search is just those things published in English. You might select just full text, right? So you get things that only appear in their entirety. The next two are important: date of publication and peer reviewed. Date of publication is important, especially if your school has a requirement on the date of publications for the the studies and the research that you're going to use in the lit review. So what I mean by that is some schools do not have any requirements. In other words, you can go back 20 years, 15 years, studies, older studies, you can use those and bring them in. That's fine. Some schools want recent research on the topic. Some schools like 5 years, some schools 5 to 7 years, some schools 10 years. So find that out. That's important for you to know. And sometimes it's not really that bad. Like if they want things just 5 years that have been published recently within 5 years, in a way that cuts down a lot of the content, that might otherwise be in your lit review, right? And then sometimes it can be a problem in that, there's not really that much that has been published within the last 5 years, so that it kind of works both ways. But the idea there is, unless research is foundational, what happened 20 years ago probably doesn't matter now. I mean, again, it might. If it's foundational, it was really important for some reason, and it's set a benchmark or something, set a standard in the area. Older research can be foundational that way, but a lot of times it's not. So the reason for having or focusing on more recent research is that this is the research that is topical and it's relevant to what you're doing, right? It's still relevant. It still has something to say about what you're doing, rather than something 20 years ago, which probably doesn't. Things have changed. So if your school requires some kind of limitation on the publication years, you want to include that in this, that you stuck to that, you adhered to that. And it's real important to say that you focused primarily on peer-reviewed academic articles. I mean, that's the gold standard for the lit review. You can use books sparingly. You can use websites, use those very sparingly. And if you use websites, use them for just information, like government websites for recent statistics, that kind of thing. But you're not kind of reviewing the material on websites like you would review the information in a study. So the gold standard, again, is the peer-reviewed scholarly or academic article or study. So it's real important to say that you focused on peer-reviewed material. How do you know if something's peer-reviewed? Well, this is a good chance for me to segue into the, I wanted to take you through a little bit of just kind of a general, search here. Just the general kind of web page of an academic library, and we're going through St. Pete College. Whatever your school is that you're at, they're going to have an online library portal that you can access because you're a student. They're going to look a little bit different, the layout, the interface, but they're probably going to have similar things. We have just a search bar that's just real general. I mean, obviously you can type anything in there that you want to search. You're going to get back a lot of stuff. It's better to do the advanced search. If you have, an idea of what you're doing, you do the advanced search. You can search just within the title. You can search within the entire, you can search the subject. You can just search authors. You can search multiple. You can leave any field. You can search multiple items, is what I'm trying to say here, search term. So we can do emotional intelligence. And, something like transformational leadership. And if you wanted a third one, if that one, you wanted that to be in if you wanted that to be in education, you could add, you can add more subject lines as needed. You can just search articles if you want here. and this is another place where you can, the type of document you want returned. This would be articles. This is up to you too, but language, English, unless you obviously can read another language, but you're still going to be writing in English. It's good to just click that. And here's the year thing where you can put in, you can limit the search by years. I usually don't mess with the day and the month. That's a little particular, but if we can only go back 5 years, you plan to be done in 2022, then that start date could be, what would it be? 2017, start year, and then do this 2022. All right, so that's the way to kind of refine your search rather than just throwing something in the general search bar. And if you look up here, there's other options. Here's your database, if you wanted to go to specific databases. I mentioned ERIC before, which is an educational database. See if it, okay, there it is right there. If you wanted to search ERIC specifically, it gives you a box for that. And it's similar. You have different boxes where you can search, put in topics, different topics. Okay, let me go back to that. If you notice some of these, like where we started, something like Academic Search Complete, and it says popular. This is a search tool. This is like a major search tool. It's like Google Scholar in the sense that it probably includes ERIC in its database search. I mean, it searches lots of databases. So things like this are good to cover a lot of ground, especially if you don't kind of know what databases are important in your discipline. You can stick with, something general, or the general, like I said, just the kind of the general advanced search function. We also have databases by subject. Right. If you're in business, you can just see the databases that deal with business. Okay. Journal search. That's a nice thing here about the journal search. You don't, if you really know that there's a journal that's really important in your discipline, and sometimes your chair will even say this, oh, you got to search this specific journal. You can search journal, you can search them by title here, or you can just search them by category. But let's go into one, because this gets into how do you tell if something is peer reviewed. And the journals will tell you usually if they're peer reviewed. Okay, here's one, Critical Studies in Men's Fashions. Who knew there was such a journal? But it is peer reviewed. Okay, it says right there. So if you have an article from a journal and you're not sure if that article is peer reviewed, or your chair questions it, sometimes they do, you can go to this area where it lists the journal articles, and it should tell you if the journal is peer reviewed. And so if your article comes from that journal, you'll be fine. Okay, and there is research help. There's tutorials, but there's also, if you look here, book an appointment, you can get help with your library searches. And this is something that research librarians do. It's part of their job. So don't feel, weird. It's also, customer service, which is pretty standard now, that anywhere you go, you shop online or anything you're doing online, they have online help. So take advantage of that if you need it. Again, that's, and here, sometimes you don't even have to book an appointment. It's just something where you could kind of, pull something up, text or chat with them in real time. So I urge you to use all your resources available to you, including the help of a research librarian if you need it. Now that's just kind of a general introduction to the page and to just kind of some of the things that are you're looking at when you're doing searches. But again, for kind of more in-depth stuff, take on it, you're going to have to get in there and kind of get your hands dirty, and also again use a research librarian for assistance if you need that. All right. Okay, let's go back to where we are. Okay, and that's the literature search strategy section. Again, not very long, but again, the idea is to show your people that you have conducted a fairly comprehensive search by listing what you searched, where you searched, how you searched it, how you filtered the search, qualified the search terms you used. And here's just an opportunity to kind of make a side note here. Again, use your resources, webinars, any resources you have online, reference librarians. But also sometimes there's never, there's not a better resource than just having a good example of a lit review or a good example of a dissertation. Your chair can provide you with one. Usually they're happy to, or you can go to ProQuest. And again, if we go back to our ProQuest, it's just another database. We don't need it by subject, but let's see, databases. Yeah. Okay, ProQuest. And ProQuest has, they publish, once your dissertation is approved and signed off, your school sends it to ProQuest to get published. So you can find dissertations, and there's all different kinds of ways to search. You could search it by school. You could search it by your school to see what dissertations have been written at your school. So you can find dissertations examples that way through ProQuest. Okay, but again, the idea is to have an example or two. It just sometimes helps you when you see what people have done, you have a concrete example. Okay. The theoretical framework usually comes next. Again, check your, I see we have a question here. I'm going to come back to it at the end now. Check your school's template, because the framework may appear in chapter 1 and it may appear again in chapter 2, or it may just appear in 1, or it may just appear in 2. So so double check that with your school and with your specific template. But typically what happens is your theoretical framework appears in 1, you kind of mention it, you talk a little bit about it, and a more elaborate version appears in the chapter 2. Okay. And if you do need to talk about the framework in chapter 2, we'll go over it a little bit here. It's going to be like it appeared in chapter 1. You're going to talk about, you're going to come out and clearly state, I am using so-and-so's theory as a theoretical framework or theoretical foundation for the study. Have a citation for it, who developed the theory, the year, what did they develop it for? Theories are developed to explain things. So what was the theory developed to do, to explain? Define the theory, define any components that are associated with the theory, any parts to the theory. Discuss what researchers have used the theory for, and then the important part is to connect it to your study. How is it going to help explain or understand and guide what you're doing? Okay, so a couple questions here. Usually one of them is conceptual framework, theoretical framework. What's the difference? And I'm just going to tell you, practically speaking, in my experience, conceptual frameworks are typically associated with qualitative studies. theoretical frameworks are typically associated with quantitative studies. Primarily, that's because usually with quantitative studies, you're using surveys or questionnaires, some kind of tool or instrument, and those always have theoretical foundations, right? I mean, they don't, you know, these questions and, you know, these surveys, they don't come from nowhere. They have theoretical foundations, and those theoretical foundations, if you're doing a quantitative study, will be the, you know, the theoretical foundations of your study, right? So let's say you're doing a study on emotional intelligence. Well, emotional intelligence is going to be your theoretical foundation, right? If you're measuring that. And here's something to keep in mind. Now, there's several surveys, instruments to measure emotional intelligence. So if you're using Goldman's instrument, for example, don't use somebody else's, don't use Smith's theory for emotional intelligence. You see what I'm saying? So if you're using Goldman's survey, use Goldman's theory of emotional intelligence, because his theory will match your survey instrument. Right. Somebody else's survey instrument may focus on different things. So that's something to keep in mind for quantitative studies. For qualitative studies, sometimes because they're exploratory, there's not a kind of a theory that encapsulates what you're doing. So you go more with concepts that are associated with what you're doing, and you put those together to create a framework. Okay. Sometimes your chair will want, in the theoretical framework of the chapter 2, you know, a study or two, a recent study or two that's used the theory, just to show that it's still important and researchers are still using it. Okay, the review of the literature. Like I said, this is the meat of the chapter. This is probably 85% of your chapter. And they're all going to be different, obviously, because people's studies are different and they focus on different things. So you're going to have a lot of information, right, from the studies that you've pulled. And part of it is like, what do I do with all this stuff? So there's an organizational challenge in front of you, right? How do I organize this material? What am I supposed to be doing with it? So part of the purpose of the lit review is not only to, show what's been done on the topic to date, or for the last 5 years or 7 years, whatever it is, to give the reader context for your study. Here's what people have been doing. But it's also to make an argument for your own study and to highlight the research problem. So as you're going throughout the review of the literature, and I'll get back to organization in a minute, I know I kind of strayed off of that path. So part of what you're doing as you go through the literature review, you want to, part of it is summary, but some of it's, analysis and evaluation. You want to bring up shortcomings of studies or weaknesses or things they didn't focus on. And those things should be in the service of, helping to make your case about why your study is different, or why your study is gonna hit something that hasn't been touched upon before, right? So kind of indirectly, in a big sense, you're making an argument for why your study is necessary and important. And in part, you're doing that by reviewing the literature and kind of critiquing it and kind of showing, hey, this is great. These researchers focused on this area, but they didn't focus on this part, which is what my study is supposed to do. So in part, the lit review is informational and involves summary, but that's only part of it. It's also evaluative and analytical. So back to organization. How do you organize it? You got all this material, you got all these you got all this information, you got all this, these studies. Well, organize it by what you're doing, by your concepts, by your factors, right? Emotional intelligence and transformational leadership. Well, those are going to be your big sections, right? And you're going to have to use subsections within that. Have a section on transformational leadership. What is transformational leadership? Well, define it how you're going to be using it for your study, then get pretty quickly into recent research on transformational leadership. Try to tie it as closely to what you're doing as possible. You may have topical subsections within that. And this is nothing you can anticipate until you see what's in the literature, right? So what have people been focusing on within transformational, the study of transformational leadership? So, you'll have these big sections on your factors, on your variables, specifically what you're doing. And then within that, you'll probably have topical subsections based on, what's in the literature. What are the trends? What are people focusing on? Okay. And so when you're writing about the literature, it's kind of a combination of synthesis and analysis. And again, a little bit of summary, but I see a lot that comments from professors. It's like, you need synthesis, you need more synthesis, you need more synthesis. Well, what is synthesis? We know what it is, but how does it manifest itself in the lit review? Is a better question. So synthesis, it's basically the combination of parts that form a whole, right? Putting things together, synthesizing them. So this is about combining information from studies to make points. And the easiest, kind of best place to think about synthesis and to think about organization is at the paragraph level. And for this, we kind of need to go back to, middle school or where you learned about paragraphs, because it's easy, in my experience and with working with people, it's easy to get really confused in chapter 2 because there's so much information. I don't know what to do with it. How do I organize it? Oh my gosh. And then people are writing these paragraphs that don't make any sense. And it's not because they don't know how to write paragraphs. It's because they have too much information, they're confused, and they're kind of lost. So just, remember, kind of revert back to, getting things tight, at the foundational level, right? So, which is the paragraph. So remember, the paragraph, has a topic sentence. It has evidence that discusses the topic or illustrates the topic, and it has a summary sentence that summarizes the paragraph and sometimes leads into the next paragraph, right? And I bring this up because this is something that professors will want to see. Sometimes they'll say things like, use the meal plan, meal, 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 and that's an acronym for something that is about, supposed to indicate paragraph organization. But people freak out. What is the meal plan? I don't know what the meal plan is. Oh my God, my professor wants me to use the meal plan. Okay, well, it's not a big deal. It's just means to organize your paragraphs better, like we're talking about here. So what does that look like? Here's an example of synthesis. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I want to make some points here. The topic sentence is highlighted in yellow. The evidence sentences that illustrate the point or to show evidence of the topic are in green, from green to green. And then the teal is the summary or the transition statement. So if you notice in the topic sentence, it says recent research has mostly shown that health literacy is an important factor in diabetic self-control and positive outcomes. Okay, clear topic about the research. And then the sentences that start with Anders et al. 2018 and go down in green are all the kind of evidence. Now, if you noticed in the topic sentence, I've said research has mostly shown, because when we get to the third example, this is about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines up from the bottom. It says, unlike Anders et al. And Gregory et al., Phillips et al. Found no statistically significant relationship between diabetes knowledge and glycemic control. Okay, that's one that doesn't confirm the topic sentence. So that's why I use the word mostly in the topic sentence. It qualifies it. And then, so this one is different. This one has a different finding than the other ones. But then I have an explanation, comma, which they attributed to a small sample size and possibly errors associated with self-reported instruments. So there may be a reason why the findings don't align. And then in my summary sentence, empirical evidence from recent research largely supports. Okay, again, the qualifying word largely. So that would be synthesis. You have a topic and you have your evidence material pulled from different articles, right, to support that topic. So that's what they mean by synthesis. And again, and the unlike and, you know, bringing up the one that's a little different, that's also synthesis. It's bringing it together, but it's saying, wait, this one didn't quite show that, and here's why. So that's what they're talking about, synthesis, having a topic, bringing material from different articles to help make your point, and then moving on to the next point you want to make. And this would be under, you know, a subsection. That would be under, you know, a section for whatever variable it is you're talking about. Okay, analysis. So the synthesis is part of it, bringing things together from different studies. There's also analysis or some bit of evaluation. So again, it's not purely all informational, right? It's not just summarizing and informing the reader. Here's what, you know, people did in their study and here's what they found. That's part of it. But where you can, you don't have to do this all the time, but throughout, any place where there's an opportunity to note a shortcoming or a weakness, or something that's similar to your study, but, you know, they didn't focus on what you focused on, you know, any opportunity to highlight weaknesses or shortcomings of previous research, you know, do that. And if there's an opportunity for you to highlight, you know, the importance to focus on what you're focusing on because it's not in the literature, do that too. And at the end, you can kind of reinforce that. But as you move through the lit review, look for opportunities for that. So yeah, analysis of the research involves noting shortcomings or gaps. You also want to note trends in the research. You know, what does research seem to be focusing on? And again, where you can, reiterate the research problem, your research problem and the need for your study where appropriate. And it all culminates kind of in an argument for conducting your study, okay, which you can get to in the summary. So the summary for the lit review is kind of like other summaries, but it's also a little different in the sense that you want to recap major points from the chapter, right? But you also want to, since the lit review is kind of a big argument for conducting your study based on what's in and what's not in the research, you want to hit that hard at the end of the chapter, right, in the summary. Remind the reader of the research problem, you know, based on what's in the research that you just reviewed and what's missing, right, and that's where your study is going to fill that gap. Right, and restate the need for your study. Okay, like there was something else I wanted to hit, but I think we're good. Okay, and here's who we are: Statistics Solutions, Dissertation Consulting, Editing, Statistics Help, Guidance. You can make an appointment for a consultation to talk to somebody more about what we do and see if it's right for you. There's our contact info. I'm going to leave that up. And I'm going to take any questions you have now.
There was someone who wrote in during the presentation and asked a question, and I just put it in the
Okay, I see it.
to you.
Yep. Okay, if working with a librarian turns up additional articles beyond those that are part of your database queries, how do you acknowledge these in your description of your lit review methods? I don't think you need to kind of specifically put it that way, but it's, if you want to put it in there that you worked with a reference librarian to conduct your search, I think that's just fine. I think that's actually good because it shows your professor that, you took it that seriously, that you actually, maybe you were struggling a little bit, and that's not to admit like weakness or admit, ignorance or anything. I think that that's quite the opposite. It indicates that you're willing to, dig deep into this and get help, because it's something that, most folks, if we don't do research all the time, right? So it's like anything else. If you're not in, you're out of practice, and things change too, right? I mean, maybe if, I did my research years and years and years ago, things have changed. So yeah, I think if you use the reference librarian or you got the help of a reference librarian, I think you would want to mention that. I don't think you have to get to the specific level that where you say, well, then once I started using the reference librarian, then that person helped me find this article, this article, and this article. I don't think you need to get that specific. I mean, you can if you want to. I think it's probably just enough to say that, you reached a point and then you enlisted the help of a reference librarian who put you on to more things. Yeah, I think that would be just fine to say. Okay, how long should the synthesis section be? Good question. And I don't have a specific answer because they're all different. I've seen lit reviews that are like 10 pages. I've seen lit reviews that are 80 pages. Sometimes it has to do with your topic, but most of the time I think it comes down to your school requirements. And I would say the sweet spot, what I see most often is 25 pages to 30, 25 to 30 pages. That seems to be the sweet spot, give or take. Sometimes they want 40, but I say 25 to 30 is something to shoot for. But again, ask your chair, see what your school requires if they have anything specific. And that's this, you asked about the synthesis section. Okay, that I'm talking about the lit review overall. But since the synthesis section is so much a part of it, I think that all still applies. What would you say is the major difference between synthesis and analysis sections? Analysis is more of a critique of the current lit on the topic. Yeah, right. And I kind of made it sound like they're separate sections, but they're not really. They're just kind of, they're different tasks, really. They don't need to be necessarily sectioned out into separate sections. But the synthesis is kind of, how you put the material together, like I showed in that example. Now you could have analysis in here too somewhere, if you wanted to stop and kind of, make a critique about one of the studies or even all of them overall, that they focused on some, certain aspect of diabetic self-control and not others that your study is going to focus on. You can insert analysis really anywhere. I hope that helped. Okay, here's another one. Are there certain webinar statistics solutions offer that go more through how to structure mixed method study section by section? I've seen some, and most seem to be organized by either quantitative or qualitative studies. We do have webinars on methodology. It sounds like maybe that's what you're getting at. We do have methods webinars, yes. We have them both on the qualitative methods and both on quantitative methods. I'm not sure, the folks who run those, I'm not sure if they cover mixed. I would imagine they do, or you could ask them. But yes, to your question, we do cover we do cover methods, and you could ask them about mixed methods specifically.
And I can look, give me just a minute and I'll look to see maybe in the archives if we have a mixed methods webinar. Let's see. So in the webinar, there are two, and it's presented twice. So I'll post the link to this particular webinar so you can actually go in and watch it, okay? And it is for a mixed methods.
Great. Okay, thank you. Okay, here's another question. How can I work around mathematical models in literature reviews? I'm not sure what that means. Yeah, I don't know what you mean by working around mathematical models. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that one because I don't really get what you're saying there.
Are you able to maybe provide more clarification on your question about mathematical models, or is it more about trying to understand the information that's presented in previous studies and you don't know how to understand that, or what's your concern with the mathematical models?
Okay, any other questions? I'll give you a few minutes there in case you need to take some time to write that out. But are there any other questions? Let me see. Okay, I meant, how can I describe a mathematical concept that other researchers have presented? I mean, if it's important to the lit review, that you need to describe mathematical concepts, I don't know what you mean. How can I describe them? I mean, just describe them, or if they need to appear as formulas, then make them appear as formulas. Again, if it's necessary for the lit review, yeah, I don't see any problem with presenting them as formulas if it makes sense to do so. Yeah, I'm not sure if that gets to what you're asking. But mathematical concepts, if they're important to the lit review to cover, yeah, I mean, describe them or represent them formulaically. Okay. Okay, great. Other questions? All right, everybody, if that's it, I'm going to wish you a great rest of your day and much luck in the future. We do cover other topics and other chapters in our webinar, so check our calendar online. And again, use your resources, and it's a lot about perseverance. You guys know the process. You hand something in, you get feedback, and you attack the feedback until there's no more feedback. All right, everybody, have a wonderful day. Thank you.